what the hell do you do with all the awful things you see around you? I think Nietzsche, the German philosopher, was right, that you really only have two weapons to deal with just the misery of life. You can either laugh or you could cry. And I think we do both, but humorists, satirists, comedians have found a way to hide their tears through laughter. And it's what we call satire. It's not really comedy at all. I mean, unless you're just there for a cheap laugh, you come on the stage and you use a lot of profanities and people applaud and this and that. I mean, when you listen to Dave Chappelle, about 90% of the things that he says have to do with politics, have to do with just human existence. And they are sad and they're tough. But he says it the way his voice is, the way his body language is, it makes you laugh. And I think there is this beautiful story that is given to us by the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard was a devout Christian, but he came to realize that he needs to teach Christianity to Christians, that these are just counterfeit Christians. They think that every single one of them are carrying the cross, and that's not really the case. They're just counterfeit. He said about himself that first, when I die on my tombstone, the only thing that you need to write, not my name, not my family name, just write that individual. Because if you really, really want to live a life that is worthy of a human being, you have to be countercultural. Look at the culture. I mean, look at Christianity, for example. It's a business. If you want to open a church next to another church, you're going to be sued. You're going to find yourself in the courts for the next 5 years. Because you're stealing another church's business. You know, that's what it is. And so he said to be an individual means to sit somewhere, to think, to really reflect on what you're doing and what society is doing to you, what your parents are teaching you, what education is teaching you. And if you think really, really well, you realize most of the things coming your way is just garbage. It really is. You know, there is a book that was found some years ago. It's called The Gospel of Nicodemus. It's not canonized, but you know, the rich young man goes to Jesus and says in that particular book that first go do the 10 commandments, and then if you are able to fulfill all the 10 commandments, then come follow me. Because what you have, and really it's not that all 10 of them Jesus was wrong, you have to just follow the last 6, because the first 4 has to do with the kingdom of God that lives inside you, but Moses doesn't really say that in the sort of language that Jesus talks about. The last 6 has to do with your responsibilities towards your family and towards your society. That's basically it. The first 4 is what Jesus is all about, which is, listen, you only have to worship Yahweh and no one else. Second is the only way to worship Yahweh, no images in your head. You can't talk about Yahweh. You can't have a cross in a church. You can't have a statue of Yahweh or God. Nothing. You're basically worshiping a black hole. You have no idea what you're doing. It's what the Christian mystics would call the cloud of unknowing. You're just in this darkness, spiritual darkness. All you know is that you don't belong down here. You have wings, you want to fly, but you have no idea where the hell to go. And God doesn't answer you very often. And once you have found the kingdom of God, that's your Sabbath. That's your resting place. You're not going to be fearful of losing your job, of losing your wife, of losing your kids, or even dying. And that's the embodiment of Jesus Christ. Once you have found Sabbath, the kingdom of God, you will walk towards your death willingly. So what he tells the rich young man before him following, JC, he says, go fulfill all the commandments. He says, I have done so. And Jesus says, no, you haven't done so, because while I was walking, I saw a homeless man. If you had done your job well, he wouldn't be homeless. So being a revolutionary fellow, he has many stories, parables of Kierkegaard, but one of the stories in particular is about this clown walking on the stage. And you know how he has the clown mask and the paint on his face, and in a very animated way, he comes screaming that the theater is on fire. Find the exit door and run out quickly. And he has a clown face, his body is moving animately, and people just applaud him, and they laugh, and they laugh. And he says, what the hell are you laughing? Run out of this theater. And again, he screams louder, but the applause become louder. And eventually everybody dies. And the point, I suppose, of comedians is the following. when you listen to really good comedians, where Cat Williams talks about his son being medicated because he had too much energy, which is, an indication of what this culture is all about. Whenever you need help, you just need friends, they give you pills. All you need is just a friend, that's all you need. And if you have too much energy because you're a 5-year-old kid, they give you another medicine to just kind of calm you down. Instead of saying, Dad, if you're the father, take him to the park and then just run around for 20 hours. Or Dave Chappelle coming on the stage talking about Jimmy Carter and his book about apartheid, about Palestine and Israel. I mean, these are tragic things, but the way they talk about them is so funny. And the audience, thousands of people are sitting and they laugh and they applaud. And I think in the laughter and in the applause, something very important gets lost. That these comedians are talking about how difficult, complex life really is, but no one pays attention. They're there to get a laugh. And if I was to kind of give you another example of sorrow and laughter, and it's something that many of us in this class, or some of us in this class, have experienced, which is really your own psychology, what happens when you hear your mom died, or your dad died, or in my case, my grandfather died. You cry for the first 5 hours, and everybody, your mom, your dad, everybody cries as well. Then physically, physiologically, you have no more tears left. And you begin to express your sorrow or sadness in a different way. Somebody tells a joke, it could be raunchy, it could be political, it could be religious, it doesn't really matter. But if you happen to be amongst people who don't really understand grief, sadness, and sometimes how it expresses itself, and then they could walk away saying, yeah, his dad died, but all he could do was just talk about sex. How stupid is he or she? But the truth is, it wasn't about sex at all. I'm paralyzed. I don't know how else to express my sadness except to release it by telling raunchy jokes. I mean, what can Dave Chappelle do? What can any good comedians do? What the hell do you do with Israel and Palestine? What do you do with homelessness? What do you do with the history of slavery? What do you do with just life being complicated? Nothing. You can't do much. You just sit back, observe, and you try to kind of make people laugh, unburden them for just a minute. There is a story that comes from Buddhism. There is a guy around the 12th century from Thailand. His name is Patao. And so he's a practicing Buddhist, but he's a businessman as well. And one night he has a dream of the Buddha. The Buddha comes to him and says, hey, what's up? And I suppose the Buddha lived in Oakland for a while. This man looks at the Buddha and says, what are you doing here? I was just having a dream about Angelina Jolie, and you came and disrupted me. What's up? He says, well, listen, you have lots of money in your pocket, and there is something about you that nobody else has. What is that? You have this smile about you. You have this presence about you. Instead of going to your business every morning, you should do a different occupation. What is that? Just go around town, knock on people's doors. And if they open the door, look into their eyes. And if you find a hint of sadness, talk to them, smile. And because of the way you are, they will smile back. They're not going to say, what are you smiling at? That's not what's going to happen. There is something about you that just melts the frozen sea of ice that lives inside all human beings, because life is hard and it turns you into a rock solid stone. He says, okay, but why should I do this? Because your smile has a tendency of unburdening people, giving them 10 minutes of freedom from the miseries of life. And if you can do that, that's beautiful. And so you realize that, well, this thing with Israel and Palestine, what's happening in Gaza, I'm a single man in Oakland. I'm a nobody, can't do anything. But I have all these feelings and emotions. And I can find language to my emotions through Dave Chappelle when he talks about injustice, or Jon Stewart sometimes, or Trevor Noah. These are beautiful people who just don't know what else to do with all the awful things in life except to come up on the stage and cloak or house their emotions in language that's common language that everyone can understand. But, we as human beings have a tendency of bastardizing everything. You put a ridiculous price tag to everything. Comedy is about just coming on stage, using profanities, making people laugh, making some money, and just leaving. They did this interview with this rap artist some time ago, and the interviewer asked this young kid, I tried to listen to your music, but just like cuss words every like 2 seconds. Don't you have any other message to give to your public, to your audience? She says, I'm not here for that. I want to be a millionaire. And by the time, my MF audience figure that out, I'm a millionaire. I don't care about those things. And when you realize that any kind of art, its genesis had to do with trying to figure out what they'll to do with life. You realize that as time goes on, they get watered down, and everything all of a sudden becomes about bling and about money and about fame. Nothing is really valued anymore. I mean, even my philosophy classes, 99.9% of my students, when they raise their hand, is that going to be on the quiz? Should the essays be MLA or a PLA or a GAY? Just write a good essay. And what's a good essay? Can I just use AI? After that, whatever.